Tonight's story from Downton Abbey is something else. We're stepping into the darkest night the house has faced so far, a night of secrets, consequences, and irreversible choices. I won't say more. You'll feel the shift as it comes. This story has taken a turn, and as always, it's the quiet moments afterward that hit the hardest. Get cozy, let your mind settle, and I'll take you back into the world of Downton. Chapter 7. An Evening's Indiscretion. Night had fallen over Downton Abbey, casting long shadows through the corridors. The house had settled into its evening routine, the family retired to their rooms, the servants completing their final duties before seeking their own rest. In the hushed stillness of the gallery, Kamal Pamuk stood in his dressing gown, a figure of quiet determination. Thomas lingered nearby, his earlier humiliation still fresh, transformed now into reluctant complicity. The footman nodded toward a specific door, confirming what Kamal sought to know. With a last glance in both directions to ensure the corridor was empty, Kamal turned the handle. Mary's bedroom was bathed in the gentle glow of a single candle. She sat at her dressing table, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, freed from the elaborate style it had been confined in throughout the day. The ivory silk of her nightgown reflected the candlelight, giving her an almost ethereal quality. She looked up at the sound of the door opening, her eyes widening with shock as she recognized her visitor. "You must be mad," she whispered, her voice a mixture of disbelief and alarm. "I am," Kamal admitted, closing the door quietly behind him. "I'm in the grip of madness." Mary rose from her seat, clutching her dressing gown closer. "Please leave. At once. Or I'll—" She hesitated, the threat hanging incomplete between them. "Or you'll what?" he challenged, taking a step further into the room. "I'll scream," she declared, though her voice lacked conviction. Kamal's confidence remained unshaken. "No, you won't." "I'll ring the bell then," Mary countered, glancing toward the servant's call. "Who's on duty now?" "The hall boy?" Kamal asked, his logic cutting through her threat. "Will you let him find a man in your bedroom? What a story." Mary stood her ground, outrage mingling with an unwelcome undercurrent of excitement at his audacity. "Do you have any idea what you're asking? I'd be ruined if they even knew we'd had this conversation, let alone if—" "What?" Kamal moved closer, his voice dropping to a seductive murmur. "Don't worry. You can still be a virgin for your husband." "Heavens," Mary replied, momentarily taken aback by his directness. "Is this a proposal?" "Alas, no," Kamal said with a hint of regret. "I don't think our union would please your family." "I'm afraid not," Mary agreed, her pride slightly wounded by his certainty. "Or mine," he added, a statement that further surprised her. The idea that there might be families who would consider the Crawleys unsuitable was a novel and somewhat affronting concept. Kamal smiled roguishly, sensing her discomfort and changing tactics. "You and my parents have something in common." "Oh," Mary arched an eyebrow. "You believe I'm much more of a rebel than I am," Kamal said, moving closer still. "Now please go." Instead, he drew her down onto the edge of the bed, his proximity overwhelming her senses. Mary continued speaking, her words becoming increasingly disjointed. "I'm not what you think I am. If it's my mistake, if I've led you on, I'm sorry, but I'm not. She felt unnerved, rattled by his presence, by the warmth of him so close to her, by her own traitorous response to his nearness. Her carefully constructed defenses were crumbling, leaving her vulnerable in ways she had never anticipated. "You're just what I think you are," Kamal contradicted gently, his eyes never leaving hers. "No," Mary protested weakly. "I've never done anything." He placed a finger against her lips, silencing her. "Of course not. One look at you tells me that." Then he was kissing her, replacing his finger with his lips, and to her own astonishment, Mary found herself responding. The world beyond this room, with all its rules and expectations, seemed to recede, leaving only the immediate reality of his touch and her own awakening desire. "Oh, my darling," he whispered against her skin. "But won't it hurt?" Mary asked, her voice small with both nervousness and anticipation. "Is it safe?" Kamal took her face between his hands, his expression suddenly tender amid the passion. "Trust me, and I promise you a night you will never forget." As he drew her toward him for another kiss, Mary surrendered to the moment, stepping willingly into territory she had never imagined herself exploring. The single candle burned lower, its flame casting dancing shadows across the walls as the night deepened around them. The first gray light of dawn was seeping through the windows when a hand clamped over Anna's mouth, startling her from sleep. Her eyes flew open in alarm, confusion giving way to astonishment as she recognized Lady Mary standing beside her bed, hair disheveled, wearing only a negligee. "Shh," Mary cautioned, her expression one of undisguised panic. Anna nodded slightly, and Mary removed her hand. With an imploring look that spoke volumes, Mary tiptoed out of the room. Anna hurriedly slipped from beneath her covers, careful not to wake Gwen, and followed her mistress into the corridor. "What?" Anna whispered, once they were alone in the servants' passage, the gravity of Mary's distress immediately apparent. "He's dead," Mary said, her voice barely audible even in the silence of the sleeping house. "I think he's dead. No, I'm sure he's dead." Anna stared at her, struggling to comprehend. "But how? Why? We were together and—" Mary's voice trailed off, the implication clear enough without further elaboration. "He's dead," she repeated, as if saying it might somehow make the incomprehensible reality easier to grasp. "In your room," Anna stated, the enormity of the situation beginning to register. Mary nodded, her eyes wide with fear. Anna took a deep breath, forcing herself to think practically despite the shocking revelation. "We've got to get him back to his own bed." "How?" Mary asked desperately. "It's in the bachelor's corridor, miles from my room." "Could we manage him between us?" Anna suggested, already mentally calculating the distance and obstacles they would face. Mary shook her head, her distress palpable. "He weighs a ton. I can't shift him at all. We'll need at least one other." She paused, considering their limited options. "What about Bates?" "He couldn't lift him," Anna replied realistically. "William can't keep a secret and Thomas wouldn't try to. And there's no point in asking Mr. Carson. He'd pass out from the shock." "Well, we've got to do something," Mary insisted, her voice edged with growing panic. "What about your sisters?" Anna suggested. Mary dismissed the idea immediately. "Sybil's too young, and Edith would use it against me for the rest of my life and beyond. Anna's mind raced through their dwindling options. Who else has as much to lose as you, if it ever gets out? Not Papa, Mary pleaded. Please don't say Papa. I couldn't bear the way he'd look at me. No, not his lordship. Anna agreed, her gaze meeting Mary's as they both arrived at the same conclusion. The expression of horror on Cora's face as she looked at the lifeless body of Kamal Pamuk sprawled among the sheets of her daughter's bed was one that would haunt Mary for years to come. Her mother's hands covered her face momentarily, as if to block out the sight before her. What happened? Cora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know, Mary replied, her composure remarkable given the circumstances. A heart attack, I suppose, or a stroke, or he was alive and suddenly he cried out, and then he was dead. Cora's hands fell away from her face, her eyes searching her daughter's. But why was he here at all? Did he force himself on you? Mary hesitated, then silently shook her head. The admission of her willing participation seemed to shock Cora even more than the death itself. She took a deep breath, visibly steadying herself. Well, we can talk about that later, Cora said finally. Now, we must decide what to do for the best. There's only one thing we can do, Anna stated, her practical nature coming to the fore. She stared meaningfully at Cora, who began to understand the implication with growing dismay. I couldn't. It's not possible. If you don't, Mary argued, her voice gaining strength from desperation, we will figure in a scandal of such magnitude it will never be forgotten until long after we're both dead. But Cora began. I'll be ruined, Mama, Mary interrupted, the stark reality of her situation laid bare. Ruined and notorious, a laughingstock, a social pariah. Is that what you want for your eldest daughter? Is it what you want for the family? Cora looked at her child with new eyes, seeing not just the poised young woman she had raised, but the frightened girl beneath, facing consequences that could destroy her future entirely. We must cover him up, she said at last, her decision made. The pre-dawn stillness of the house was broken only by their careful movements as the three women emerged from Mary's room with their macabre burden. Anna carried Kamal's legs while Mary and Cora each supported an arm over their shoulders. They had dressed the corpse in his own dressing gown, a final dignity afforded to the man who had disrupted their lives so thoroughly. Hurry, Cora urged in a whisper. The servants will be up soon. We've got time, Anna assured her, though her voice betrayed her own nervousness. They moved with painful slowness down the darkened corridor, the weight of the body and the fear of discovery making each step an ordeal. As they progressed, Kamal's head lolled sideways against Cora's neck, causing her to cry out involuntarily. Mama! Mary hissed in warning. Sorry, Cora whispered, steeling herself to continue. They had nearly reached the turn in the corridor when the creak of a door opening from the back stairs froze them in place. Daisy, the kitchen maid, leaned out to investigate the noise she had heard. In the distance, the three women were turning the corner, but not before Daisy caught a glimpse of Mary, with the arm of a corpse draped over her shoulder. The kitchen maid stood rooted to the spot, her sleep-fogged mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. By the time she collected her thoughts, the strange procession had vanished from sight, leaving her to wonder if it had been nothing more than a bizarre dream. In Kamal's bedroom, the three women worked quickly to arrange the body in a believable position. Anna hung the dressing gown behind the door, while Mary attended to Kamal himself, tears streaming silently down her face as she attempted to close his eyes. "I can't make his eyes stay shut," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Leave that and come away," Cora urged, anxious to be gone before discovery. Anna approached Mary with gentle understanding, placing her hands on the young woman's shoulders. "Her ladyship's right. We must get back to our rooms." She led Mary toward the door, but Cora stood in their path, her expression hardened by the night's ordeal. "I feel now I can never forgive what you have put me through this night. I hope in time I'll come to be more merciful, but at this moment, I cannot think of it." "You won't tell Papa," Mary pleaded, suddenly looking very young and vulnerable. "Since it would probably kill him and certainly ruin his life, I will not," Cora assured her, though her tone remained cold. "But I keep the secret for his sake, not for yours." "Yes, Mama," Mary acknowledged, unable to meet her mother's eyes. "Anna," Cora continued, "I will not insult you by asking that you also conceal Lady Mary's shame." The words carried an implicit trust in the maid's loyalty, a recognition that some bonds transcended the boundaries of class. "Now, let us go," Cora said, opening the door and leading them silently back into the corridor. The three women hurried down the passage until they reached the door to the back stairs, where Anna slipped away, leaving mother and daughter to continue on alone. "She won't betray us," Mary said with quiet certainty. "I'm sure she won't," Cora agreed wearily. "It pains me to say it, but this morning I find that I trust a housemaid more than I trust my own child." With that parting blow, she moved on, leaving Mary to return to her room alone, carrying the weight of the night's events and her mother's judgment like twin burdens upon her shoulders. As morning light filled the house, Thomas walked along the corridor with a tray of tea and a jug of hot shaving water. Reaching Kamal's door, he gave a soft knock, waited a moment, and then entered when no response came. The sight that greeted him was one he hadn't anticipated, despite his years of service and exposure to life's harsher realities. The body lay where the women had left it, eyes open, staring sightlessly at the ceiling. For a moment, Thomas stood frozen in shock. Then the tray slipped from his hands, crashing to the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire house. Tea and water spread across the carpet as Thomas stared at the lifeless form of the man who, just hours earlier, had been so vibrantly, dangerously alive. Chapter 8. A Fatal Night. The grand staircase of Downton Abbey had witnessed countless arrivals and departures, moments of joy and sorrow throughout its long history. On this particular morning, it bore witness to Lady Mary's descent, her composure a masterpiece of self-control. She was dressed simply in a white shirt and black skirt, the only indication of her sleepless night being the faint traces of red rimming her eyes. As she reached the bottom step, the dining room door opened and Evelyn Napier emerged. His expression shifted from pleasant greeting to solemnity as he approached. "I imagine you've heard what's happened?" he asked, studying her face for signs of distress. "Yes," Mary replied, the single word carrying the weight of a night she would never forget. "Terrible thing. Awful," Evelyn continued. "Ghastly for your parents. I don't suppose I shall ever make it up to them." It's not your fault, Mary said quietly, the irony of her reassurance not lost on her. Evelyn's distress was genuine. I brought him here. If it isn't my fault, whose is it? Mary let the question hang unanswered in the air between them, unwilling and unable to claim the responsibility that was rightfully hers. Breakfast's almost finished, Evelyn offered, changing the subject. Shall I tell someone you're down? No, thank you, Mary declined. I had a tray in my room. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. My mother never used to allow trays for unmarried girls. His attempt at lightness fell flat against Mary's somber mood. Nor does mine, as a rule. The strained silence that followed made it clear that his efforts at normal conversation were futile in the face of the tragedy that had befallen the house. I was wondering if you might show me the gardens before I go, he suggested. We could get some fresh air. I won't, if you'll forgive me, Mary replied. I ought to stay and help Mama. Of course, Evelyn acquiesced immediately. Despite her outward composure, Mary felt as though she were drowning, caught in the undertow of events beyond her control. Evelyn seemed to sense her turmoil, though he misattributed its cause. I am so sorry about all this, he said sincerely. I should never have inflicted him on you in the first place. His choice of words struck a painful chord. Mary felt compelled to defend the man who had died in her bed. Please don't say that. We were glad to have him here. Very glad. Lynch has taken a message to the local. They'll be along to collect him in an hour or so, Evelyn informed her. I'll wait until that's done. Mary stared at the ground, unable to meet his eyes as the reality of what would happen next. Strangers handling Kamal's body, the official pronouncement of death, the eventual removal, washed over her. I've told your father I'll deal with the embassy, Evelyn continued. There won't be any more annoyance for you. Thank you, Mary managed, her voice unsteady with suppressed emotion. Evelyn hesitated, then spoke with genuine feeling. Actually, he was a terribly nice fellow. I wish you could have known him better. I took him on as a duty, but I liked him more and more the longer I knew him. The dam broke then. Mary's carefully maintained facade crumbled as tears streamed down her face. Evelyn watched her, his expression shifting from sympathy to dawning comprehension as he realized the depth of her reaction betrayed a connection he hadn't suspected. Perhaps you saw his qualities for yourself, he suggested quietly. Mary could no longer maintain the pretense. She broke down completely and fled upstairs, leaving Evelyn to watch her departure with growing understanding. Which obviously you did, he murmured to himself, the pieces finally falling into place. In the kitchen, the aftermath of breakfast service was underway. William and Thomas carried down the remains of the family's meal, followed by Anna and Gwen. They unloaded their trays with practiced efficiency as Daisy assisted, her expression unusually pensive. I had an uncle who went like that, William remarked, breaking the subdued silence. Finished his cocoa, closed his book, and fell back dead on the pillow. Thomas's mouth curled in a sardonic smile. I don't think Mr. Pamuk bothered with cocoa much, or books. He had other interests. I meant you can go just like that, William clarified earnestly, with no reason. That's why you should treat every day as if it were your last, Gwen observed, the philosophy clearly connected to her own dreams of a different life. Well, we couldn't criticize Mr. Pamuk where that's concerned, Thomas replied, his tone laden with innuendo. The comment clearly disturbed both Anna and Daisy, though for very different reasons. "What do you mean?" Daisy asked, her expression troubled by more than innocent curiosity. "Nothing," Thomas deflected. "Careful with that." He picked up his empty tray and departed, followed by William. "You're very quiet," Gwen noted, turning to Anna once the footman had gone. Anna's reply carried more sharpness than she intended. "There's a corpse upstairs. What would you like me to do? Sing?" Gwen, taken aback by the uncharacteristic response, left the kitchen without further comment. As she entered the passage, she heard her name whispered from the staircase. "Gwen." Lady Sybil stood on the steps, partially concealed, a newspaper clutched in her hands. "Your ladyship?" Gwen responded, surprised by the secret manner of the approach. Sybil descended to the bottom stair, producing a newspaper with a box prominently circled. "I saw this. It came out yesterday. Look, it's for a secretary at a new firm in Thirsk. See?" Gwen stared at the young lady in bewilderment. "I don't understand. How did you know?" "That you wanted to leave. Carson told my father," Sybil explained. "And you don't mind?" Gwen asked, still struggling to comprehend why the daughter of the house would assist her in leaving service. Sybil's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "Why should I? I think it's terrific when people make their own lives, especially women." A bond formed between them in that moment, two young women from vastly different worlds, united by a shared belief in the possibility of change. Gwen took the newspaper, staring at the ringed advertisement. A suitable post for a beginner. She read aloud. "What does that mean?" "It means the wages are rock bottom, but then you can apply for the next job as an experienced assistant," Sybil explained with practical wisdom that belied her sheltered upbringing. Gwen nodded, considering the opportunity. "We'd have to wait and see if they'd give me an interview." "Write to them today," Sybil urged, "and name me as your reference. I can give it without ever specifying precisely what your work here has been." "Is that quite honest?" Gwen questioned, her conscience troubled by the suggestion. Sybil's reply reflected a pragmatism that surprised the housemaid. "Later you can tell them whatever you wish, but first get the job." As Sybil turned to leave, Gwen called after her, "Milady." Sybil paused, looking back. "Thank you," Gwen said simply, the words inadequate to express the depth of her gratitude. In the gardens, the morning sun filtered through breaks in the clouds, casting dappled light across the manicured lawns. Evelyn Napier walked briskly toward Cora, who stood alone near a stone bench, lost in thought. "Lady Grantham," he called, increasing his pace to catch up with her. "I've come to say goodbye. They're bringing the car round to take me to the station." "Have you seen Lord Grantham?" Cora asked, her composure nearly perfect despite the night's ordeal. "I have, and I've apologized for wreaking havoc on your house," Evelyn replied. Cora's expression softened. "You've got everything?" "I think so. Your groom's been very kind in helping my chap to organize the horses. And I've taken all of Kamal's belongings," Evelyn confirmed. Behind them, the car arrived on the gravel drive. William and Taylor began loading Napier's and Pamuk's luggage, strapping it securely to the back. "He's gone now, I understand," Cora said, the statement hovering between question and acknowledgement. "Yes, he's gone," Evelyn affirmed quietly. Cora was silent for a moment, contemplating the finality of those simple words. "Is his mother still alive?" she asked suddenly. "I'm afraid so," Evelyn replied. "Kamal used to talk of her often." "I should like to write to her, if you'd be kind enough to send me the address," Cora said. "She'll have had such hopes for him." "Indeed," Evelyn agreed, sensing there was something more behind Cora's unusual concern. "You build up your dreams for your children," Cora continued softly, "and then fate just smashes them to pieces." The words hung in the air, laden with meaning that extended far beyond the immediate tragedy. Evelyn waited, intuiting that Cora was speaking of more than just the Turkish diplomat's mother. "Have you said goodbye to Mary?" Cora asked, changing the subject. "I have," Evelyn confirmed. "Will we be seeing you here again?" The question was polite, but carried a note of uncertainty. Evelyn hesitated. "Nothing would give me more pleasure, but I'm afraid I am a little busy at the moment." He paused, then continued with characteristic honesty. "I wonder if I might risk embarrassing you, because I should like to make myself clear." "Please," Cora encouraged. "The truth is, Lady Grantham, I am not a vain man," Evelyn began. "I do not consider myself a very interesting person, but I feel it's important that my future wife should think me so. A woman who finds me boring could never love me, and I believe marriage should be based on love, at least at the start." Cora listened without judgment, finding nothing dishonorable in his assessment. "Thank you for your faith in me, Mr. Napier. Your instincts do you credit. Good luck to you." She offered her hand in parting, a gesture of forgiveness and understanding. Evelyn accepted it gratefully before walking away across the wide lawn, taking with him one possible future for Mary, a future now rendered impossible by the events of the previous night. In the library, Robert stood by the fire, Pharaoh lying contentedly at his feet. Carson entered with his customary quiet efficiency. "Did Mr. Napier get off all right?" Robert inquired. "He did, my lord," Carson confirmed. "Taylor waited to see he was safely on the train." Robert nodded his approval. "And poor Mr. Pamuk has been taken care of?" "We got Graspies from Thirsk in the end," Carson reported. "They're very good, and they didn't mind coming out on a Sunday." "Death has no day of rest," Robert observed somberly. "Is everyone all right downstairs?" Carson considered the question. "Well, you know, he was a handsome stranger from foreign parts 1 minute, and the next he was as dead as a doornail. It's bound to be a shock." "Of course," Robert agreed. "Upstairs or down, it's been horrid for the ladies. And for the female staff, I expect." "It's particularly hard on the younger maids," Carson acknowledged. Robert nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed. Don't let the footmen be too coarse in front of them. Thomas likes to show off. But we must have a care for feminine sensibilities. They are finer and more fragile than our own." The two men shared a moment of perfect understanding, united in their belief in the natural order of things. A belief that would have been sorely tested had they known the truth of what had transpired beneath their roof during the night. Mrs. Hughes descended the service stairs, carrying boot hooks and a nightdress that had been left in one of the guest rooms. Halfway down, she heard a groan and discovered Bates leaning heavily against a table at the base of the stairs, his face contorted with pain. "Mr. Bates, I am going to have to insist that you tell me what is the matter," she declared, her Scottish accent more pronounced in her concern. Bates straightened, composing his features into a semblance of normalcy. I thought it was for Mr. Carson to give me orders. Mr. Carson's no better than any other man when it comes to illness, Mrs. Hughes replied firmly. Now tell me what it is, and I'll see what I can do. It's nothing, truly, Bates insisted. I twisted my bad leg and walked on it too soon. I'll be fine in a day or two. His attempt at deception did nothing to convince the experienced housekeeper. Well, if it isn't, I'm sending for the doctor. Their conversation was interrupted by Anna's arrival. She carried a pair of shoes, but her attention was immediately drawn to Bates's unusual pallor. You left these behind in the blue room when you were dressing Lady Mary for the kill, Mrs. Hughes said, handing over the forgotten items. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hughes, Anna apologized, her eyes still on Bates. Are you all right? He is not all right, and he will not tell me why, Mrs. Hughes declared with exasperation. A man's got to have some secrets, Bates replied, attempting to lighten the moment. But he can have too many, Anna countered softly, her gaze holding his with a depth of understanding that went beyond words. As their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that secrets, whether kept by necessity or by choice, exacted their own price from those who harbored them. Chapter 9. The Silent Burden. The drawing room at Downton Abbey presented the picture of feminine tranquility that afternoon. Cora sat with her 3 daughters, each engaged in quiet pursuits, reading and embroidery occupying their hands if not their thoughts. The somber mood that had descended upon the house following Kamal Pamuk's death hung in the air like an invisible shroud. The peaceful tableau was interrupted as Violet swept into the room, Carson announcing her arrival a moment after she had already made her entrance. The butler closed the door discreetly, leaving the family to their private discussion. Is it really true? Violet demanded, her walking stick tapping emphatically on the carpet. I can't believe it. It's true, Cora confirmed quietly. Violet shook her head in disbelief. But last night he looked so well. She directed this observation at her granddaughters, clearly expecting some response. When none came, she continued with characteristic forthrightness. Of course it would happen to a foreigner. Typical. Don't be ridiculous, Mary said sharply, her nerves frayed beyond endurance. Violet's eyebrows rose at her granddaughter's tone, but she pressed on undeterred. I'm not being ridiculous. No Englishman would dream of dying in someone else's house, especially someone they didn't even know. Oh, Granny, even the English aren't in control of everything, Sybil interjected, attempting to diffuse the growing tension. Well, I hope we're in control of something, if only ourselves, Violet replied primly. But we're not, Mary suddenly exclaimed, her composure fracturing. Don't you see that? We're not in control of anything at all. The vehemence of her outburst shocked everyone into silence. Before anyone could respond, Mary stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her with a force that reverberated through the hushed drawing room. Cora's expression tightened. Edith, go and tell Mary to come back at once and apologize to her grandmother. No, Violet interceded, surprising everyone with her clemency. Leave her alone. She's had a shock. We all have. Let her rest. Edith looked to her mother, who nodded reluctantly. As Edith retook her seat, the door opened to admit William with the tea tray. Ah, just the ticket, Violet declared, her tone lightening. Nanny always said sweet tea was the thing for frayed nerves, though why it has to be sweet I couldn't tell you. She settled herself between her two remaining granddaughters, her unexpected sympathy for Mary suggesting that beneath her acerbic exterior, the Dowager Countess possessed keener emotional insight than most gave her credit for. In the kitchen, the household's pulse beat on despite the upheaval above stairs. Thomas stood by while Daisy filled a hot water jug, his expression smug with the knowledge of a secret he could exploit. At a nearby basin, O'Brien used soda to remove marks from a collar, while Mrs. Patmore bustled about her domain, issuing instructions with her customary vigor. Gwen watched the scene unfold, her mind still dwelling on the job advertisement Lady Sybil had shown her earlier. What did you mean? Mr. Pamuk lived each day as if it were his last, Gwen asked Thomas, unable to contain her curiosity. What I said, Thomas replied evasively. But how did you know? Gwen pressed, sensing there was more to his comment than mere observation. Thomas's face closed. I can't keep William waiting. Gangway. He lifted the hot water jug and headed for the door, but as he passed O'Brien, she murmured under her breath, I'll be asking the same question later, so you'd better have an answer ready. Thomas winked at her and continued on his way. Mrs. Patmore glanced over at Daisy, who remained standing in the same spot, seemingly lost in thought. Daisy, assuming you have not been hypnotized by Dr. Mesmer, could you oblige me by cutting up them onions? Now? Mrs. Patmore demanded. Yes, Mrs. Patmore, Daisy replied, moving to her task with unusual listlessness. Where have you hidden the flour? I can't see it anywhere, the cook continued, her frustration mounting. It's just there, Mrs. Patmore, Daisy pointed out, her voice small. Well, fetch it to me then. You're all in a daze today, Mrs. Patmore observed, suspicion beginning to replace irritation as she noted the kitchen maid's unusual behavior. O'Brien watched the exchange with calculating eyes, her interest piqued by Daisy's demeanor. The lady's maid had developed a sixth sense for secrets during her years of service, and she could tell when someone was carrying a burden of knowledge, particularly knowledge they didn't know what to do with. At Crawley House, the atmosphere was markedly different from the subdued tension that pervaded the Abbey. Isabel sat writing correspondence, while Matthew reviewed legal documents at his desk. Do you think we should have gone up there? Matthew asked suddenly. To see how they are. I sent a note, but I thought I'd just be in the way, Isabel replied. Why? Matthew hesitated before answering. I thought Mary was rather struck with him last night, didn't you? It must have been frightful for all of them, Isabel said pragmatically. But there it is. In the midst of life we are in death. On second thoughts, perhaps you were right to stay away, Matthew conceded, his mother's platitude reminding him why visits of condolence could sometimes do more harm than good. Yet he couldn't quite shake the image of Mary's face as she'd conversed with the Turkish diplomat. Animated in a way he'd rarely seen her, the thought that she might be genuinely grieving rather than merely shocked had not occurred to him until this moment. Evening had settled over Downton when O'Brien stood brushing Cora's hair in the Countess's bedroom. The lady's maid worked in silence, sensing her mistress's preoccupation and unusually melancholy mood. What a horrible, horrible day, Cora said finally, her reflection in the mirror showing the strain of her sleepless night. You'll be glad to see the end of it, O'Brien agreed, beginning to plait Cora's hair for sleeping. Poor Mr. Pamuk, Cora continued. I keep thinking of his parents. He had such a brilliant future ahead of him. Death is all we can rely on, O'Brien remarked with characteristic bleakness. A moment of silence passed before O'Brien ventured. I suppose Mr. Napier will have to manage everything. I suppose he will, Cora agreed wearily. We all thought him a very nice gentleman, O'Brien continued, subtly probing. Yes, he is nice, Cora affirmed without enthusiasm. Will we be seeing a lot of him? O'Brien asked, her true question thinly veiled. Cora recognized the maid's attempt to gauge Mary's matrimonial prospects, but found she lacked the energy to dissemble. I don't expect so, no. Because we rather hoped Lady Mary might have taken a shine to him, O'Brien pressed, confirming Cora's suspicion. It seems not, Cora replied, effectively closing the subject. Oh, well, there are plenty more fish in the sea than ever came out of it, O'Brien offered philosophically. Cora stood wearily, removing her dressing gown. I hope there are, O'Brien. I certainly hope there are. The lady's maid watched her mistress with sharp eyes, noting every nuance of her behavior. Something significant had occurred beyond the obvious tragedy of the diplomat's death, something that had affected Cora deeply. The question was, what exactly had transpired during the night, and how might that knowledge prove useful? In the corridor of the servants' quarters, Mrs. Hughes encountered Carson as he made his final rounds of the house, candle in hand. Are you turning in? She inquired. Not quite yet, but you go, Carson replied. She nodded and turned to leave, but Carson called after her. And, Mrs. Hughes, I know some of them missed church today, but so did the family. I don't want anyone reprimanded. I agree, Mrs. Hughes responded, her expression softening. It's been unsettling for everyone. Good night, Mr. Carson. The housekeeper's departure left Carson to continue his solitary inspection of the house. He moved methodically through the dimly lit corridors, his candle casting elongated shadows on the walls. Eventually, he reached the bedroom that had briefly been occupied by Kemal Pamuk. Carson opened the door quietly and entered. The room was tidy now, the bed stripped bare except for folded blankets at one end. He looked around, perhaps ensuring that nothing had been overlooked in preparing the room for its next occupant. Are you looking for something? Mary's voice came suddenly from the darkness. Carson raised his candle, illuminating Lady Mary's figure seated by the window. Your ladyship? Are you looking for something? She repeated, her face pale in the candlelight. I just wanted to make sure the room had been tidied up after the people had left, Carson explained, surprised to find her there. Mary nodded, rising from her seat to stare at the neat, empty bed where Kemal had lain only hours before. Life can be terribly unfair, can't it? It certainly can, Carson agreed softly. Everything seems so golden one minute, and then turns to ashes the next, Mary continued, her voice carrying a vulnerability she rarely allowed others to witness. Can I ask you a question, Carson? Of course, milady. Have you ever felt your life was somehow slipping away, and there was nothing you could do to stop it? Mary asked, the question emerging from some deep well of despair within her. I think everyone feels that at one time or another, Carson replied gently. Mary seemed lost in her own thoughts, almost speaking to herself. The odd thing is I feel, for the first time really, I understand what it is to be happy, It's just that I know I won't be. Oh, don't say that, milady, Carson protested. Don't raise the white flag quite yet. Mary looked bewildered by his response, not understanding its context. You will still be mistress of Downton, Carson continued reassuringly. Old Lady Grantham hasn't given up the fight, not by a long chalk. Oh, that, Mary said dismissively. I wasn't thinking about that. Carson's expression softened with paternal concern. And if I may say so, your ladyship, you are still very young. Am I? Mary asked wistfully. I don't feel it. She attempted a smile, but the effort didn't reach her eyes. Carson, moved by her obvious distress, made a declaration that bridged the chasm between their stations. We're all behind you, milady. The staff, we're all on your side. Thank you, Carson, Mary said, genuine warmth entering her voice for the first time. You've always been so kind to me, always, from when I was quite a little girl. Why is that? Even a butler has his favorites, milady, Carson admitted, a rare personal confession from the typically formal man. Does he? Mary smiled faintly. I'm glad. Lady Mary, Anna's voice called from the corridor, interrupting the moment. The maid appeared in the doorway, candle in hand, stopping short at the sight of Carson. Oh, your ladyship, I thought you might be in. Carson and I were just making sure that everything was shipshape and Bristol fashion, Mary explained quickly, moving toward the door. The tender moment between them had passed, the boundaries of class reasserting themselves with Anna's arrival. Good night, Carson, Mary said as she departed with her maid. Good night, milady, Carson replied, watching them go with the protective concern of a man who had, indeed, allowed himself the indulgence of a favorite in his years of service. Left alone in the room that had witnessed the beginning of the night's tragedy, Carson extinguished his candle and closed the door, leaving Kamal Pamuk's ghost to its rest. The next morning, the servants' hall rang with the sound of bells summoning them to their duties. The staff rose from the breakfast table, responding to their respective calls. That's Lady Mary, Mrs. Hughes noted, as one of the bells continued to jangle insistently. Send not to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for me, Anna remarked with grim humor, standing to answer the summons. The servants dispersed until only Bates remained at the table. He started to rise, then sank back with a barely suppressed groan of pain. Steeling himself, he forced his body upright and hobbled toward the door, his limp more pronounced than usual. From the shadows of a doorway, Mrs. Hughes watched his labored progress, her concern deepening. Whatever afflicted Mr. Bates went beyond his usual disability, and she was determined to discover the cause, whether he wished her to or not. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. I hope this story has brought you a little peace and relaxation. As always, feel free to drift off whenever you're ready.
Did I make the most of loving you? So many things we didn't do. Did I give you all my heart could give? To unlived lives with lives to live. When these endless lonely days are through, I'll make the most of loving you. I'll make the most of loving you. most of all we had. Not seeing you makes my heart sad. Did we make the most of summer days? We still have time to change our ways. When these endless lonely days are through, I'll make the most of loving you. 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 Did those tender words stay in my head? So many things were left unsaid. Did I give you all my heart could give? To unlived lives with lives to live. When these endless lonely days are through, I'll make the most of loving you. I'll make the most of loving you. I'll make the most of loving you. I'll make the most of loving you.